Caroline Whitman pointed at my 6-year-old son in front of half of Charleston's charity mothers and said, "Either you cheated on my son, or you stole something from my family." The bake sale went silent. Not awkward silent. Southern silent. The kind where nobody gasps because good manners are apparently more important than oxygen. I stood behind my table at Marion Square with buttercream on my wrist, a tray of lemon bars in front of me, and both of my boys frozen beside the donation jar. Mason stared at Caroline with those wide gray eyes that always made strangers pause. Miles, who had been slipping a mini cupcake into his pocket like a tiny criminal, slowly lowered his hand. For some reason, I looked down at the buttercream first. A smear of pale yellow on my skin. That was what my brain chose to notice, while my ex-mother-in-law accused me of adultery in public. Helpful brain. Very professional. "Excuse me?" I said. Caroline Whitman looked exactly as she had the day her son divorced me. Cream linen dress, gold bracelet, silver blonde hair fixed into a shape so precise it probably had a maintenance contract. Her face was calm, polished, and cruel in a way rich people often call composed. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at Mason. My Mason, my quiet boy, my rule follower, the one who apologized to furniture after bumping into it. "That child," Caroline said, "has Matthew's face." A plastic fork hit a paper plate nearby. I stepped in front of Mason. "Don't look at my son like he's evidence." Caroline's eyes snapped to mine. "Then explain him." "Mom?" Mason whispered. I put my hand on his shoulder. Miles leaned around my leg and said, "We're not supposed to talk to strangers who look angry. Honestly, fair." Caroline's smile twitched. "How old are they?" "That is none of your business." It became my business when you brought two little Whitmans into public and thought no one would notice. The name Whitman moved through the crowd like dropped silverware. 6 years ago, Matthew Whitman divorced me after a fertility diagnosis shattered him. Severe male factor infertility. That was the phrase on the clinic paperwork. But Caroline turned it into my shame. She told Charleston I had failed her son, that my body had ruined the Whitman future. Matthew let her. Then he disappeared behind lawyers' silence and his mother's perfect handwriting. He never knew I was pregnant, not because I hid it, because every letter I sent came back. Caroline lifted her phone toward my boys. I moved before I even thought. "Do not take their picture." Her eyebrow rose. "Afraid of documentation?" "No, I just don't let bitter women collect my children like antiques." Someone behind the cupcake table made a tiny cough laugh. Bless her. I owed her a muffin. Caroline lowered the phone, but her expression became colder. "There will be a DNA test. Not because you demand one next to a tray of snickerdoodles. If those boys are Matthew's, you committed fraud. If they aren't, then you're exactly what I always said you were." There it was. The threat wrapped in pearls. My bakery, my reputation, my son's peace, all of it hanging under a white tent while women pretended to inspect banana bread. Caroline leaned closer. "You have 1 week, Lily. After that, I stop asking politely." Miles whispered. "She was asking politely?" "No, baby," I said. "She was not." Caroline smiled at the crowd and walked away like she hadn't just thrown a grenade into my life. 10 minutes later, while I wiped frosting off Mason's trembling fingers, my phone buzzed. Matthew Whitman, after 6 years of silence. "Is it true?" Then another message. "Are they mine?" 3 wedding cake orders disappeared before lunch because gossip in Charleston moved faster than humidity and had better social connections. The first cancellation came at 6:38 a.m., while I was sweeping powdered sugar from the bakery floor. The second arrived by email with too many exclamation points and the phrase, "We just don't want drama around our special day," which was rich coming from a bride who once cried because I suggested ivory frosting instead of antique ivory frosting. The third bride called personally. She whispered that her mother had heard things. Then she hung up like scandal could travel through Bluetooth. I stood in the kitchen of Sugar Salt Bakery with my phone in one hand and a piping bag in the other. Tessa, my assistant manager, looked up from a tray of biscuits. She was 5'2", built like a cinnamon roll, and had the fighting spirit of a raccoon in a locked pantry. "Do I need to fight someone?" she asked. "You're tiny. I fight emotionally." "That's worse." She wiped flour off her cheek. "Was it Caroline?" I didn't answer. Tessa had known me long enough to understand silence as a full paragraph. The bell over the front door chimed. I forced on my customer face. Welcome, please buy croissants. I am not actively being dismantled by old money. A woman from the bake sale stepped inside and looked around like she expected to find adultery behind the scone display. She ordered 1 coffee, just 1. She used to buy 2 dozen muffins every Thursday. Progress, apparently, had a cinnamon crumb topping. By afternoon, the twins' school called. My body knew before my brain did. Lily, Mrs. Albright said carefully, I wanted you to know there's been some chatter among parents. Chatter, the mixer thudded in the back kitchen. It sounded like it was also tired of people. Nothing official, she said. Of course, unofficial cruelty was practically a Charleston art form. What kind of chatter? A pause, questions about Mason and Miles, about their father. I closed my eyes. Did someone say something to my children? Not directly, but Mason seemed upset during lunch. That reached a place Caroline hadn't touched yet. When I picked them up, Mason walked to the car with his backpack dragging behind him. Miles kicked every acorn on the sidewalk like each one had personally betrayed us. At home, Mason sat at the kitchen table and stared at his dinosaur pasta. Mom, he said, am I a secret? The fork slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. I stood there for a second. Just one. Then I knelt beside him. No, baby. Then why did that lady talk like she found me? I swallowed. Because some adults think being loud makes them right. Miles nodded seriously. Like when the smoke alarm screams but it's only toast. Exactly. Mason didn't smile. After they went to bed, I pulled the old cedar box from the top shelf of my closet. It smelled like dust, paper, and the version of me who used to believe truth was enough if you said it clearly. Inside were 3 returned envelopes, all addressed to Matthew Whitman at his family's house on South Battery. Returned to sender, refused. The first one had been mailed 8 days after I learned I was pregnant. My hands shook as I lifted it. Inside was the letter I had written at my kitchen table with a positive test beside me and tea I never drank. Matthew, I know everything ended badly, but you deserve to know this. I'm pregnant. I pressed the paper to my mouth. Then I saw something I had missed years ago. The signature on the delivery refusal slip. C. Whitman. Caroline. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. DNA first. Truth later. I stared at the message. Then I placed the returned letter on the table and took a picture of Caroline's signature. For once, the past had left fingerprints. Matthew Whitman walked into my bakery the next morning and looked at my son's drawings on the wall like he had found his own ghost in crayon. I was behind the counter boxing cinnamon rolls when the bell chimed. I didn't look up at first. My hands were sticky with glaze. My eyes burned from 3 hours of sleep. And I had already decided that if one more person came in to casually ask about my private life, I was going to start charging a gossip fee. Then Tessa went quiet. That woman was never quiet unless something was on fire or a man in expensive shoes had entered the room. I looked up. Matthew stood near the door in a gray suit, no tie, rain caught in his dark hair. Older than I remembered, still handsome in that careful Whitman way, like his family had been bred for oil portraits and emotional repression. Lily, he said. I set the pastry box down slowly. We're closed for drama before 9. Tessa's eyes widened. Do you want me to? Stay, I said. Matthew glanced at her. She stays, I repeated. I'm done having conversations with your family without witnesses. His face tightened. Then he nodded. For a moment, nobody moved. The bakery smelled like sugar, coffee, and warm butter. The radio played a cheerful song that felt deeply inappropriate, like the universe had hired the wrong DJ. Are they mine? He asked. Not hello? Not how have you been? Not I'm sorry my mother detonated your life beside a cupcake raffle. Straight to ownership. I wiped my hands on a towel. You mean Mason and Miles? His throat moved. Yes. They are not a chair you left in storage. Lily? No. You don't get to say my name like I'm being unreasonable. Your mother accused me of cheating in front of my children. She shouldn't have done that. I laughed once. It came out tired. That's the Whitman family motto, isn't it? She shouldn't have done that, followed by absolutely no consequences. He looked down. Good. I hoped shame made itself comfortable. I didn't know, he said. I tried to tell you. His eyes lifted. When? I reached beneath the counter and slid the first returned letter toward him. He stared at it. 8 days after I found out, I said. Then again, at 12 weeks. Then after the first ultrasound when they told me it was twins, his fingers touched the envelope but didn't pick it up. I never saw these. I know. My mother said you left town and didn't want contact. I did leave town. After your lawyer told mine all communication should go through official channels and every unofficial channel mysteriously died. Matthew's face changed. Not enough for innocence. Enough for doubt. She wouldn't. Don't, I said. He stopped. The ovens hummed behind me. Tessa moved a tray of muffins into the display case with the dramatic discretion of someone absolutely listening. I leaned forward. You believed I was the reason you couldn't be a father? You let her tell everyone that. You let me carry the shame of your diagnosis because carrying your own was too heavy. He flinched. A carriage horse clopped past the window outside because Charleston loved adding historical ambiance to modern emotional collapse. Matthew picked up the envelope. His voice dropped. Caroline signed this? Yes. She told me you wanted money. I smiled without humor. Of course she did. He looked at me then, and for the first time since he walked in, he looked scared. I need to know the truth. No, Matthew, I said. You need to ask why your mother worked so hard to keep you from hearing it. I slid the second envelope across the counter. Start with this. Ask her who refused delivery in July. Caroline's signature was on every returned envelope, and by midnight I hated her handwriting more than I hated low-fat cream cheese. I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with papers spread around me in uneven piles. Returned letters, old clinic receipts, certified mail slips, a cracked iPhone 7 that hadn't been turned on since the twins were toddlers. Mason's superhero sock somehow ended up in the middle of the evidence because motherhood did not respect legal categories. Tessa sat beside me eating cereal from a mug. This is the saddest treasure hunt I've ever seen, she said. I know. Also, this phone looks like it survived a boat accident. It survived twin toddlers. Worse. I plugged the phone into 3 chargers before it finally lit up with the enthusiasm of a dying lighthouse. The screen glowed, flickered, and demanded a passcode I had not used in 6 years. My mind went blank. Then I remembered. Matthew's birthday. I hated that. The phone opened. Old photos appeared first. Ultrasound pictures. Mason and Miles as tiny bundled burritos. Me in a hospital bed looking pale, stunned, and furious at a lactation consultant who had said, just relax. Like I had not just produced 2 humans and lost all relationship with sleep. Then I found the voicemail folder. 1 unsent audio file. My breath caught. I pressed play. My own voice came through the tiny speaker, younger and shaky. Matthew, it's Lily. I don't know if you'll listen, but I need you to know I'm pregnant. I'm not asking you for anything. I just can't let you find out someday and think I hid them from you. Tessa stopped chewing. On the recording, I cried once, tried to hide it, failed. It's twins, my younger voice whispered. 2 boys. The message ended. The room stayed silent, not empty silent, heavy silent. The kind that sits beside you. I never sent it, I said. Tessa touched my shoulder. Why? Because when I called, his number had changed. When I emailed, it bounced. When I mailed letters, Caroline refused them. After a while, I thought chasing him would just give his family more chances to hurt me. That was the part nobody understood. Leaving wasn't one decision. It was 1,000 exhausted decisions made while my body carried 2 lives and my heart carried 1 betrayal. The next morning, I went to the old post office branch on Broad Street with the returned envelopes in a folder. The clerk, a man named Roy with reading glasses and the energy of someone who had watched humanity fail through certified mail, looked over the receipts. Refused at address, he said, signed by C. Whitman. Can you print verification? He looked at me over his glasses. Custody issue? Family nightmare with paperwork. Ah, he said. Tuesday. He printed everything. Then I called Palmetto Reproductive Medicine, the clinic Matthew and I had gone to after a year of failed trying, and whispered blame. The coordinator put me on hold. The hold music was a cheerful flute version of something that had clearly never experienced trauma. When she returned, her tone had changed. Miss Parker, your archived file is available with proper authorization, but I should let you know something. My grip tightened. What? 6 years ago, someone requested copies of Mr. Whitman's fertility evaluation. Matthew? A pause. No, the request was made by Caroline Whitman. I looked down at the certified receipts in my hand. The paper suddenly felt like the beginning of a fire. Caroline attacked my bakery before breakfast, which was rude because I had not even had coffee strong enough for class warfare. At 5:32 a.m., Sugar Salt Bakery had 27 new one-star reviews, all anonymous, all strangely dramatic about my dishonesty, poor moral character, and questionable hygiene, which was impressive, since half of them claimed to be from customers who ordered croissants on Sunday. We were closed on Sundays. Tessa read one aloud while loading muffins into the oven. The owner seems like the kind of woman who lies about children. Wow, they're not even pretending this is about pastry. Report it. I am. Also, someone said our banana bread tastes like betrayal. That's cinnamon. By 9, 2 catering clients canceled. By 10, a local mom group had a thread about me. By 11, a man in boat shoes walked in, stared at the twins' photo near the register, and asked, "So are they really his?" I looked at him. He looked at the cookie display. I said, "Sir, this is a bakery, not a paternity kiosk." He bought nothing. Good. His energy would have curdled the butter. At noon, a courier delivered a letter from Caroline's attorney. He handed it to me in front of 3 customers because humiliation apparently had tracking numbers now. The words parental fraud sat in the middle of the page like a cockroach on white carpet. Caroline demanded DNA testing, a public correction of false narratives, an immediate discussion of the children's rightful family access. Rightful. There was that word again. People like Caroline loved calling things rightful when they meant mine. I didn't answer right away. I walked into the kitchen, set the letter on the stainless steel table, and stared at it while the ovens breathed warm air around me. For 1 second, I wanted to be 28 again, and stupid enough to believe if I ignored the Whitmans, they would eventually leave me alone. Then Mason's voice came back to me. Am I a secret? No, not anymore. I called Matthew. He answered on the first ring. Did you know? I asked. About what? The reviews. The attorney letter? Pick a weapon. A pause. No. His voice sounded rough, tired. For a second, I almost believed him completely. Then I remembered how much damage had happened in the space between Matthew not knowing and Matthew not stopping. Your mother is threatening me with parental fraud. She can't do that. She can do anything until someone makes it expensive. I'll talk to her. Matthew, your version of talking to her has historically produced results similar to whispering at a hurricane. He exhaled. I deserve that. You deserve worse, but I'm busy. That evening, the DNA kit arrived at my bakery instead of my home. Caroline's attorney had sent it to my workplace like he wanted my staff to watch me open my humiliation. Tessa looked at the box. Want me to accidentally drop it in the fryer? We don't have a fryer. I can buy one. I almost laughed. Almost. I agreed to the test for one reason. Caroline wanted DNA to prove I lied. I knew it would prove the opposite. Still, swabbing my son's cheeks made my hands shake. Mason sat on the kitchen stool, serious and still. Is this because of the angry lady? He asked. Yes, I said carefully. But this test does not decide who you are. Miles opened his mouth around the swab like he planned to eat it. Do not chew the legal evidence. He crossed his eyes. It tastes like boring. After they fell asleep, I sealed the samples. Matthew texted near midnight. My mother says you trapped me. Then another. I don't know what to believe anymore. I typed back with steady hands. Start with the fact that she lied before I did. The DNA results came back on a Thursday morning, and Caroline Whitman lost the weapon she had been polishing for 6 years. I opened the email in the bakery office while the ovens hummed behind the wall, and Tessa argued with a supplier about butter prices like she was negotiating a hostage release. The file downloaded slowly because our Wi-Fi had the emotional stability of a damp napkin. When the report finally opened, I stopped breathing. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Matthew Whitman was the biological father of both Mason and Miles. I already knew. My body knew. My memory knew. Every calendar page from that last terrible month of my marriage knew. But seeing it stamped in clean black letters still hit like a door opening in a room I had stopped trying to escape. Tessa read over my shoulder. Well, she whispered, damn. Elegant legal analysis. I try. For a minute, I didn't move. The bakery kept living around me. Trays slid into ovens. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed near the front counter. Life had a rude habit of continuing even when your past was actively catching fire. Matthew arrived 30 minutes later, pale and unshaven, holding his own copy of the report. He stood in the doorway of the office like a man who had walked into the wrong life and found it fully furnished. "They're mine," he said. "No," I said. "They're themselves." He closed his eyes. "You know what I mean." "I do. That's why I corrected you." He sat across from me. The chair was too small for him, which felt spiritually appropriate. "I thought I couldn't," he said. "I know what you thought." "No, Lily," his voice cracked. "I thought I was completely sterile. That's what my mother told me. That's what she said the doctor said." Something cold moved through me. What did the doctor actually say? Matthew looked down at the report in his hand, like it might rearrange itself into mercy. "I don't know." That was the first honest thing he had said in years. My phone rang. "Caroline." I let it go to voicemail, then another call, then a text. "We need to discuss my grandsons. Yesterday they were proof of fraud, today they were hers by blood." I turned the phone so Matthew could see. His face hardened, not at me, at her. "She doesn't get to pivot that fast. She has had decades of practice." He swallowed. "I called Palmetto Reproductive Medicine. They said my archived fertility file requires formal authorization. Caroline requested a copy 6 years ago." His head snapped up. "What?" "The clinic told me. She requested your records. She said she got a summary from Dr. Ellis." "Your family doctor?" He nodded slowly. "He handled everything after the diagnosis. My mother said I was too fragile to deal with the details." I stared at him. There it was. The Whitman family tragedy in one sentence. A grown man wrapped so tightly in his mother's control he called it care. "Matthew," I said quietly, "you weren't fragile. You were convenient." He looked wounded. He did not argue. That evening, Caroline's attorney issued a new statement, saying the DNA results confirmed the boy's Whitman heritage, and that Caroline looked forward to restoring family bonds Miss Parker had obstructed. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Matthew. His reply came quickly. "I'm requesting the full fertility file tomorrow." A minute later, another message, "And this time my mother won't be in the room." Matthew's fertility file did not say he could never be a father, and that single sentence broke something neither of us could put back. We sat in a small conference room at Palmetto Reproductive Medicine with beige walls, a fake plant, and a watercolor of a sailboat that seemed wildly optimistic for the amount of emotional drowning happening beneath it. Dr. Nora Klein adjusted her glasses and opened the scanned file on a tablet. "I want to be clear," she said. "Mr. Whitman's initial results were poor. Severe oligospermia, very low count, low motility." Matthew stared at the table. His hands were folded so tightly his knuckles looked white. "But not 0? I asked. Dr. Klein looked at me. "Not 0. The words fell softly. Matthew flinched like they had made a sound. Dr. Klein continued. "The notes also indicate possible temporary contributing factors. You had a high fever 6 weeks before testing, Mr. Whitman. You were also taking medication that can temporarily affect sperm production. The recommendation was to retest in 3 months before making any permanent conclusions." For a second, nobody spoke. Not 0. Retest. 3 months. Our marriage had been buried in less time than it took for a result to become reliable. I placed both hands flat on my lap because I didn't trust them. "Did anyone tell us that?" I asked. Dr. Klein turned the tablet. "The recommendation appears in the full report. The summary letter sent to your family physician was more cautious, but this follow-up note is very clear." Matthew leaned forward. His voice was low. "Who received the full report?" Dr. Klein hesitated. "With your signed release today, I can confirm a copy was requested and released to Caroline Whitman, listed at the time as your authorized family contact." Matthew closed his eyes. I remembered that year too clearly. Caroline making appointments, Caroline calling doctors, Caroline telling me Matthew needed space, then telling Matthew I was making his diagnosis about myself. She had not created his shame. She had weaponized it. Dr. Klein printed the release history. At the bottom was Caroline's signature. Again, that woman had built a prison out of signatures. Then came the email. Not from the clinic, from Matthew's old Gmail archive, which he finally searched while sitting beside me in his car outside the clinic. His hands shook as he typed Dr. Ellis into the search bar. One forwarded thread appeared. Dr. Ellis to Caroline Whitman, 6 years earlier. "Caroline, I recommend Matthew repeat the test after the medication clears. This may not be permanent." Her reply was 3 lines. Matthew needs certainty, not false hope. Help him understand this marriage has no future if children matter. I read it twice. The parking lot outside shimmered in late afternoon heat. A palmetto bug crawled across the curb like even nature wanted to flee the scene. Matthew whispered. She knew. I did not comfort him. That may sound cruel, but there are moments when another person's pain is real and still not yours to carry. I had carried enough Whitman pain to last a lifetime. She knew enough, I said. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. I believed her. Yes, I believed her over you. Yes, he pressed both hands over his face. For the first time, Matthew Whitman looked less like a man wronged and more like a man finally meeting the cost of his own cowardice. My phone buzzed. Caroline again. A voicemail. Her voice was calm, almost amused. Lily, whatever you think you found, be careful. Some families survive scandal better than small bakeries do. I played it for Matthew. He stared through the windshield. Then he said, She's hosting the Whitman Foundation Gala Saturday. I know. She'll try to control the story there. I slipped the printed email into my folder. Then maybe, I said, we should bring the truth. Matthew confronted Caroline in the Whitman house, and she looked more offended by his raised voice than by the 6 years she stole from her own son. The house on South Battery was exactly as I remembered it. White columns, gas lanterns, ancient oak trees dripping Spanish moss over the sidewalk. The kind of home tourists photographed from the street, never knowing how many family sins could fit behind polished shutters. I had no intention of going inside. Then Matthew called me from the porch. She won't talk unless you're here. I almost laughed into the phone. That sounds like a her problem. Please, Lily. The word please sounded strange from him, smaller, less Whitman. So I went, not for him, for the boys, for the letters Caroline refused, for the pregnant woman I had been, sitting alone with returned mail in her hands, wondering if truth mattered when nobody wanted to receive it. Caroline sat in the parlor beneath a portrait of some dead Whitman man who looked like he had personally invented judgment. She wore navy silk and pearls, because apparently villainy had a dress code. Her eyes flicked to my folder. How theatrical. I sat across from her. You accused me of stealing children in public. I'd say we're all committed to theater. Matthew stood by the fireplace. His face was tight. Did you receive Lily's letters? He asked. Caroline folded her hands. Your ex-wife sent emotional correspondence during a difficult time. I protected you. Did you refuse them? I managed them. His jaw tightened. Answer me. Her expression sharpened. Do not speak to me like that in my home. That was when I saw it. Matthew did too. Caroline did not hear a son asking for the truth. She heard property malfunctioning. He placed the returned envelope on the coffee table. See, Whitman, he said. Your signature. She barely glanced at it. You were broken. The word landed in him. I saw it. Caroline continued, calm and awful. You were not sleeping. You were humiliated. You would have crawled back to her if she said the right thing. And then what? Raise another man's children? Let that girl drag you into a life beneath you? They were mine, he said. She looked at me then, and the mask dropped. She was not right for this family. There it was. Not medicine. Not concern. Not protection. Class. I felt my anger settle into something clean. You didn't save him from me, I said. You saved yourself from having a baker in the bloodline. Caroline's mouth tightened. You were a waitress who learned fondant. And you were a mother who learned forgery-adjacent emotional terrorism. We all have hobbies. Matthew turned away for a second, breathing hard. Caroline stood. This is nonsense. The DNA proves those boys are Whitmans. We will correct the situation publicly at the gala. My blood went cold. What does that mean? It means I will not let you frame my family as villains because you were too proud to come to us properly. I sent letters. You sent chaos. Matthew looked at her. Did you know Lily was pregnant? Caroline said nothing. Silence filled the room. Not accidental silence. Confession silence. Matthew's voice dropped. I'm removing you from the foundation board. She laughed. Actually laughed. You don't have the votes. Maybe not yet. Her eyes moved to me. You think this ends with you being welcomed? You are still the mistake. I stood, folder in hand. No, Caroline, I'm the witness. As I walked out, she called after me. Saturday, then. Let's see whose truth Charleston believes. Caroline Whitman smiled beneath a ballroom chandelier, while the screen behind her said celebrating women, children, and family health. The irony was so thick I could have frosted a cake with it. The Whitman Foundation Gala filled the Charleston Hotel ballroom with white roses, gold chairs, champagne flutes, and people who used the word community while avoiding eye contact with anyone who actually needed one. I stood near the back in a black dress Tessa forced me to buy. "You look terrifying," she whispered beside me. "I feel like I'm wearing an expensive napkin. A terrifying napkin." On stage, Caroline accepted applause with one hand over her heart. Matthew stood to the side, pale but steady. The board members sat at a reserved table, smiling politely, unaware they were about to have a very bad evening with dessert service. Caroline began her speech. "Family," she said, "is not simply blood. It is duty, legacy, and the courage to protect what matters." I took a sip of water and nearly choked. Tessa leaned in. "Do not throw that glass. It looks rented," Caroline continued. "Recently, my family has faced deeply personal circumstances, but I believe truth heals." Matthew moved. It was small at first. One step, then another. He reached the microphone before she finished. The room shifted. A rustle. A nervous laugh. One woman lowered her champagne like it had suddenly become evidence. "Mother," Matthew said quietly. "Stop." Caroline's smile froze. "Matthew, this is not the time. It should have been time 6 years ago." The ballroom went silent. He looked out at the crowd, then down at his notes. For a second, I thought he might fold. I had seen him fold before, in doctors' offices, in dining rooms, under his mother's hand. Then he put the notes away. "My ex-wife, Lily Parker, tried to tell me she was pregnant after our divorce. I never received her letters because my mother refused them." A murmur moved through the room. Caroline's face drained, but she kept smiling. That woman could smile through a hurricane if donors were watching. Matthew continued. "I was told I could never have children. The full medical record said otherwise. It recommended retesting. My mother had the full report. She did not share it." One board member stood halfway. "Matthew," he raised a hand, "you should see the documents before deciding whether she represents this foundation." That was my cue. I walked forward with the folder. Every step felt impossible. Every step felt simple. Caroline hissed when I reached the stage. "Do not do this." I looked at her. "You already did." Matthew handed the folder to the board chair. Returned letters, certified refusal receipts, the fertility report, Dr. Ellis's email, Caroline's reply, her voicemail threatening my bakery. No shouting, no dramatic music, just paper. Paper had ruined me once. It felt right to let paper answer. The board chair read the first page, then the second. Her expression changed from confusion to horror, to the cold calm women get when they are about to make public decisions. Caroline grabbed the microphone. "This is a private family matter, twisted by a bitter woman who trapped my son." A sound moved through the ballroom. Not agreement. Disgust. Matthew took the microphone back. His hand shook, but his voice held. "No, I failed Lily. I let shame and my mother's control make me cruel. But Lily did not trap me. She told the truth. I chose not to hear it." Caroline looked at him like he had struck her. The board chair stood. "Mrs. Whitman, we need you to step away from the podium." That was the fall. Not jail, not handcuffs. Worse for Caroline. Public removal. People watched as 2 board members guided her off stage. Her pearls still gleamed, her face did not. Outside afterward, Matthew found me near the valet stand. Rain misted over the sidewalk. The gas lamps flickered behind him. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed him. That did not change the answer. "An apology can open a door," I said. "It does not rebuild the house." Matthew's first letter to the boys arrived 2 weeks after Caroline resigned from the foundation, and I let it sit unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Not because I was cruel, because paper had been dangerous in my life. Returned letters, legal threats, medical summaries, refused envelopes. For years, paper carried other people's decisions into my home and pretended they were facts. This envelope was different, plain white, forwarded through my attorney, Matthew's handwriting on the front, careful and slanted. Mason noticed it first. "Is that from the sad man?" he asked. Miles looked up from his cereal. "The one Grandma Tessa says has expensive guilt?" "Tessa is not your grandma. She gives us snacks. Emotionally, she has a case." I picked up the letter and turned it over. "It's from Matthew," I said. "He wrote it for both of you. I'm going to keep it safe until we decide together when to read it." Mason frowned. "Is he our dad?" There it was. The question I had known was coming. I sat between them at the small kitchen table, surrounded by cereal bowls, school papers, and a plastic dinosaur wearing a Band-Aid for reasons nobody had explained to me. Matthew is part of how you were born, I said carefully. Miles squinted. Like a recipe? Kind of. So you're the oven? I closed my eyes. Please never say that at school. Mason didn't laugh. But is he our dad? I reached for his hand. Being a dad is more than biology. Biology is how a body starts. Family is what people do after that. He looked down at his cereal. Did he know about us? No. Because of the angry lady? Because a lot of adults made bad choices. Caroline made the worst ones. Matthew made choices too. He should have asked more questions. He should have looked harder. Miles stirred his cereal into paste. Can he visit? Not yet. Maybe someday. Slowly. With rules. Like no grabbing? Mason asked. Exactly. No grabbing, no lying, no acting like children are prizes. That Saturday, I closed the bakery early and drove the boys to Folly Beach. The sky was blue in that soft coastal way, with sunlight scattered across the water like broken glass. The air smelled like salt, sunscreen, and fried shrimp from the pier. Miles ran ahead with a bucket. Mason walked beside me, holding Matthew's letter in both hands because he had asked to bring it but not open it. We sat near the dunes eating ice cream that melted faster than dignity in August. Miles got chocolate on his cheek, his shirt, and somehow his knee. Mason leaned against my side and watched the waves. Mom, he said, are we Whitmans? I brushed sand from his ankle. You are Mason and Miles Parker. But blood? Blood is one fact, not the whole story. He thought about that. Miles held up a shell. This one looks like a tiny taco. Important scientific discovery. He nodded gravely. I looked out at the ocean and thought about Caroline demanding a DNA test because she wanted to prove I had lied. Instead, it proved I had spent 6 years telling the truth to people who had already chosen not to hear me. Matthew would have a chance someday. Maybe. Not because he deserved to skip the damage, not because DNA gave him a key, but because my sons deserved a life where truth did not arrive as a weapon. For now, they had waves, ice cream, sand in their shoes, and a mother who never left. Mason slipped his hand into mine. Miles slipped his sticky hand into the other. I did not pull away. Love, I had learned, was not bloodline, legacy, or a name printed on old Charleston invitations. Love was staying when staying was hard. And I had stayed. 3 months later, Caroline Whitman sent me a handwritten apology on cream stationery so thick it could have stopped a small bullet. I knew it was from her before I opened it. Nobody else in Charleston sealed an envelope like it was a legal threat, wearing perfume. Tessa stood beside me in the bakery kitchen, holding a tray of pecan bars. Do we burn it? She asked. No. Frame it? No. Use it to level the wobbly prep table? I looked at the envelope. Tempting. I opened it anyway. The apology was exactly what I expected. Elegant, controlled, full of sentences that almost took responsibility, then stepped aside at the last second. I regret the pain caused. Mistakes were made in a difficult season. I acted from fear. Fear. That word sat on the page like it deserved sympathy. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I did not answer. Some apologies are doors. Some are just windows people wave through so they can say they tried. Matthew's apologies were different. Not perfect, not dramatic, just consistent. He wrote to the boys every other week. Short letters, no pressure, no demands. He asked about school, dinosaurs, soccer, Miles's very serious shell collection. He sent no gifts after I told him not to. That mattered more than the letters. For once, a Whitman heard a boundary and did not treat it like a negotiation. 6 months after the gala, I let him meet Mason and Miles at Hampton Park. Not alone. Not as a father arriving to reclaim a throne. As a man sitting on a bench with shaking hands, waiting for 2 boys who owed him nothing. Mason stayed close to me at first. Miles asked if Matthew was the recipe guy, which nearly ended me on the spot. Matthew smiled, but his eyes went wet. I guess I am, he said. They played for 20 minutes. That was all. 20 minutes of awkward questions, pine cones, and Miles explaining that turtles were just rocks with opinions. When we left, Matthew did not ask for more. He stood by the bench and said, "Thank you." I nodded. That was all I could give him that day. Sugar Salt survived. Better than survived, actually. After the gala, people came in acting like buying cupcakes was a moral statement. I accepted their money with grace and only moderate judgment. The one-star reviews disappeared. The canceled brides came crawling back. I took one of them. Not all. Forgiveness was holy, but my calendar had standards. Caroline resigned from 2 more boards before the end of summer. Charleston did not exile her completely. Cities like Charleston rarely exile their own. They just smile differently at brunch. But she lost the thing she loved most: control. She could no longer tell the story first. And sometimes that is the closest thing to justice the world offers. A year after the bake sale, Mason asked to open Matthew's first letter. We read it together at the kitchen table. Miles listened while eating toast with so much jam it qualified as a structural hazard. Matthew's letter did not ask them to call him Dad. It did not blame Caroline. It did not ask for forgiveness. It said, "I am sorry I was not there. You did not deserve to be missed by someone who should have looked harder. I hope someday I can know you in whatever way feels safe for you." Mason was quiet afterward. Then he folded the letter carefully and said, "I think he's trying." "Yes," I said. "I think he is." Miles licked jam off his thumb. "Can trying people still be wrong?" I looked at my sons, my beautiful, strange, sharp little boys. "Yes," I said, "and wrong people can still choose better later." That night, after they fell asleep, I stood in the bakery kitchen alone. The ovens were off. The counters were clean. Rain tapped gently against the windows. For years, I thought the truth would arrive like thunder. It didn't. It arrived in envelopes, signatures, medical notes, small apologies, and 2 boys laughing with flour on their faces. Caroline had wanted DNA to prove I had lied. Instead, it proved something much larger. It proved that blood can start a story, but it cannot finish one. The people who finish the story are the ones who stay, the ones who tell the truth when it costs them, and the ones who choose love even after the world gives them every excuse to harden. I turned off the bakery lights and locked the door behind me. Then I went home to my sons.